I discovered the crack on a Tuesday morning while jogging across Willow Creek Bridge, the kind of hairline fracture that makes a structural engineer's blood run cold even 20 years into retirement. My name is Gregory Garrison, and I had spent 4 decades designing bridges across 3 continents before settling into what I thought would be a peaceful retirement in Meadowbrook Estates, a planned community outside Charlotte, North Carolina. The development boasted tree-lined streets, cookie-cutter houses in 6 approved color schemes, and a homeowners association that could rival the IRS for bureaucratic enthusiasm. Willow Creek Bridge connected the main residential section to the community park and playground, a decorative structure that crossed a drainage creek. It wasn't particularly large, maybe 40 feet long, but it saw constant foot traffic from families heading to the park, joggers like myself and kids riding bikes. The crack ran diagonal across the 3rd concrete support beam, barely visible unless you knew what to look for. I stopped mid-stride, my morning routine forgotten as I crouched down to examine it more closely. The morning dew made it stand out just enough. My hands trembled slightly as I traced the pattern with my eyes, not touching it, years of professional habit kicking in. This wasn't settlement cracking or superficial damage from weather. This was structural failure in progress. I pulled out my phone and took several photographs from different angles, the engineer in me already cataloging observations. The crack originated from what looked like a corroded rebar placement, evidenced by rust staining around the fissure. Water had clearly been seeping into the concrete, probably for months or even years. I walked the length of the bridge slowly, examining each support. 2 more showed similar patterns, though less advanced. My wife Sarah had warned me about getting too involved in community affairs. She had passed away 3 years ago, and this retirement community was supposed to be my fresh start, a place where I could golf, read, and fade quietly into my golden years. But I couldn't ignore this. If that bridge failed during heavy use, people would die. Children would die. I went home and spent the rest of the morning in my study, which Sarah used to call my cave. My engineering books still lined the shelves. My old calculator sat on the desk next to a modern laptop I barely knew how to use. I downloaded the photographs and enhanced them, making notes. Then I drafted a detailed report, complete with photographs, analysis, and recommendations. The bridge needed immediate inspection by a licensed structural engineer, followed by either extensive repairs or complete replacement. In the interim, it should be closed to traffic. The next morning, I printed out my report, put it in a folder, and drove to the HOA office located in the community center. The building was new, all glass and steel, paid for by our ever-increasing HOA fees. I had heard complaints about the costs, but never paid much attention. I paid my dues on time and mostly kept to myself. The receptionist, a young woman named Emily, looked up from her computer with a practiced smile. "Good morning, Mr. Garrison. How can I help you today?" "I need to speak with someone about a safety concern regarding the Willow Creek Bridge," I said, holding up my folder. Her smile faltered slightly. "The bridge? Is something wrong?" "There are structural issues that need immediate attention. I've prepared a report." She picked up her phone and spoke quietly, then directed me to wait. 5 minutes later, I was ushered into an office where Brenda Patterson, the HOA president, sat behind an imposing desk. Brenda was 52, according to the community newsletter, with blonde hair styled into an aggressive bob and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She wore a cream-colored blazer that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. "Mr. Garrison, Emily mentioned something about the bridge?" Her tone was pleasant but clipped, the voice of someone used to dealing with complaining homeowners. I sat down without being invited and placed my folder on her desk. "I discovered structural damage to the Willow Creek Bridge yesterday morning. I've prepared an engineering assessment. The bridge is unsafe and needs immediate attention." Brenda's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose slightly. She opened the folder and began flipping through the pages, her expression growing more pinched with each photograph. "Mr. Garrison, I appreciate your concern, but we have professionals who handle these matters." "I am a professional," I said calmly. "I was a licensed structural engineer for 40 years. I specialized in bridge design and safety. This is serious, Brenda. That bridge could fail, and people could get hurt." She closed the folder with a decisive snap. "Mr. Garrison, I understand you have a background in engineering, but you're not a licensed inspector in North Carolina, are you?" "I'm retired, but the license doesn't change what I can see with my own eyes. Those cracks indicate structural failure. The bridge needs to be evaluated immediately." Brenda's smile tightened. "We'll take your concerns under advisement. The HOA has a maintenance committee that reviews all infrastructure issues. I'll make sure they receive your report. Under advisement isn't good enough. The bridge should be closed today, right now, until a proper inspection can be conducted." Her eyes went cold. "Mr. Garrison, I understand you're concerned, but we cannot simply close community amenities based on one person's opinion. That bridge was inspected when it was built 5 years ago. 5 years is a lifetime for a structure with these kinds of defects. The inspection when it was built clearly missed something, or the construction was substandard. Either way, it's dangerous now. Brenda stood up, signaling the meeting was over. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. We'll handle it through proper channels. Have a good day. I left the office frustrated but hopeful that they would at least look into it. I had done my duty as a concerned resident and a professional. Surely they wouldn't ignore a legitimate safety hazard. I was wrong. A week passed with no action. The bridge remained open. I watched families cross it daily, saw children running across its span, and felt my anxiety growing. I went back to the bridge 3 times that week, documenting how the cracks had grown perceptibly. I took measurements, careful and precise, showing expansion of nearly 2 millimeters in just 7 days. That kind of growth was catastrophic. On the 8th day, I received a letter from the HOA. My hands shook slightly as I opened it, expecting news about the bridge inspection. Instead, I found a violation notice. Dear Mr. Garrison, it has come to our attention that you have been trespassing on HOA property in restricted areas. Multiple residents have reported seeing you beneath the Willow Creek Bridge taking measurements and photographs. Article 7, Section 3 of the HOA Covenant states that residents may not access maintenance areas or conduct unauthorized inspections of community property. This constitutes your first warning. Further violations may result in fines up to $500 per incident. Please govern yourself accordingly. Sincerely, Brenda Patterson, HOA President. I read the letter 3 times, unable to believe what I was seeing. They were threatening me with fines for trying to document a safety hazard. I had crawled partially under the bridge to get better photographs of the support beam damage, but calling it trespassing was absurd. It was community property, accessible to anyone willing to get their shoes muddy. I called the HOA office immediately. Emily answered with her cheerful greeting, but her tone changed when I identified myself. Oh, Mr. Garrison, I'll see if Mrs. Patterson is available. She wasn't, of course. I left a message requesting a callback and an explanation. No one called back that day or the next. On day 10, I decided to take a different approach. I attended the monthly HOA board meeting, which was open to all residents. The meeting was held in the community center's conference room, a space that could hold maybe 50 people but usually only attracted a handful of retirees with nothing better to do. That night, about 15 residents sat scattered among the chairs while Brenda and 4 board members sat at a long table up front. The meeting dragged through mundane business: approval of last month's minutes, discussion of landscaping contracts, debate over whether the community pool should open Memorial Day weekend or the first week of June. I waited through 45 minutes of tedium until they reached the open forum section where residents could raise concerns. I stood up. Gregory Garrison, 4782 Maple Ridge Court. I want to discuss the safety concerns I raised about the Willow Creek Bridge. Brenda's expression went neutral. Mr. Garrison, as I mentioned when we spoke, your concerns have been forwarded to the maintenance committee. That was 10 days ago. The bridge is still open, still being used by families with children, and the structural damage is getting worse. I've continued to monitor it, and the cracks are expanding. This is an emergency situation. A murmur went through the small audience. A few people pulled out phones, probably looking up which bridge I was talking about. One of the board members, a man named Richard Spaulding, leaned forward. Mr. Garrison, what exactly are these concerns? We haven't heard about any bridge problems. Before I could answer, Brenda cut in. Mr. Garrison believes he's identified some cracks in the concrete. However, he's not a licensed inspector, and we cannot make maintenance decisions based on unlicensed opinions. I'm a retired structural engineer with 4 decades of experience, I said, keeping my voice level. I've designed bridges on 3 continents. I know structural failure when I see it, license or no license. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to bring in a licensed inspector to evaluate the bridge, close it until then for safety. Another board member, a woman named Susan Chen, spoke up. That seems reasonable. If there's a potential safety issue, we should have it checked. The cost of bringing in an inspector on short notice could be several $1,000s, Brenda said sharply. We have a budget to maintain, and we can't waste money every time someone thinks they see a problem. What's the cost if the bridge collapses and someone gets killed? I asked. What's the cost of the lawsuit? What's the cost of a child's life? The room went silent. Brenda's face flushed red. Mr. Garrison, that's an inflammatory and inappropriate comment. You're engaging in fear-mongering. I'm engaging in reality. I've brought you documentation, photographs, and analysis. I've done everything I can to warn you. If you refuse to act and someone gets hurt, that's on you and this board. Richard cleared his throat. Perhaps we could have our regular maintenance contractor take a look? They handle structural repairs. Your regular maintenance contractor is a landscaping company that also does some handyman work, I said. my frustration breaking through. This requires a licensed structural engineer who specializes in bridge safety. Anything less is negligent. Brenda stood up. Mr. Garrison, you've made your point. The board will discuss this matter and make a decision. Thank you for your input. When will you decide? How many more days do you need while that bridge stays open? This meeting is not a forum for you to berate the board. If you continue to be disruptive, I'll have you removed. I looked around the room at the other residents, most of whom looked uncomfortable and confused. Anyone with children should avoid that bridge until it's been properly inspected. That's all I'm asking. Just keep your kids safe until we know for sure. I sat down, my heart pounding. The meeting continued, but I barely heard it. When it ended, a few residents approached me with questions, but Brenda intercepted them, pulling them aside for whispered conversations. I saw her shaking her head, saw the sympathetic glances they gave her. She was positioning me as the crazy old man, the paranoid engineer who couldn't let go of his career. 3 days later, I received another letter from the HOA. This one informed me that I had been fined $500 for disrupting an HOA meeting and making unsubstantiated and inflammatory accusations against the board. Additionally, I was fined another $500 for 2 more incidents of trespassing based on resident reports that I had been seen near the bridge in restricted areas. $1,000 in fines. I had never even gotten a parking ticket in my life, and now I was being fined $1,000 for trying to prevent a disaster. I consulted with a lawyer that week, a man named Tom Henderson, whose office was in downtown Charlotte. He listened to my story, reviewed my documentation and the HOA letters, and leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. The fines are probably within their rights based on the covenants you signed when you bought the property, he said. HOAs have broad authority to enforce their rules, even if those rules seem arbitrary or unfair. The disruption fine is questionable, but fighting it would cost more in legal fees than the fine itself. What about the bridge? Can I force them to inspect it? Tom shook his head slowly. That's trickier. You're not alleging that they've violated the covenants or that they're discriminating against you. You're alleging they're not maintaining common property adequately. North Carolina law does require HOAs to maintain common areas, but proving inadequate maintenance usually requires demonstrable harm. The bridge hasn't failed yet being the key word. I'm trying to prevent the harm. I understand, Mr. Garrison, but from a legal standpoint, you'd need to show actual damage or get an official inspection report confirming the danger. Could you hire your own inspector? I had thought about that. It's not my property to inspect. I'd need permission to have someone do a thorough examination, probably with equipment. The HOA would never allow it. Then you're in a difficult position. You could try reporting it to the county building department. They might investigate if there's a public safety concern. That was something I hadn't considered. Would they actually come out? Maybe. It depends on their workload and how serious they consider the complaint. Can't hurt to try. I filed a complaint with Mecklenburg County the next day, providing all my documentation and photographs. The woman who took my information was polite but non-committal. We'll review this and determine if an inspection is warranted. It may take a few weeks. A few weeks? People are using that bridge every day. If it fails during that time, sir, we have limited inspectors and hundreds of complaints. We'll get to it as quickly as we can. I hung up feeling helpless. My entire career had been built on preventing disasters through careful planning and design. Now I could see a disaster approaching like a slow-motion car crash, and no one would let me stop it. I started spending my mornings sitting on a bench within sight of the bridge, watching people cross it. I wasn't measuring anymore, wasn't taking photographs. I just watched and waited, my phone in my hand, ready to call 911 if I saw the structure begin to fail. Other residents noticed, of course. Some would nod politely as they passed. Others whispered to their companions and gave me wide berth. On the 23rd day after I first reported the damage, I received my third letter from the HOA. The fine was $2,000 this time. Intimidating and harassing residents through surveillance activities near community amenities. They claimed multiple residents had reported feeling uncomfortable with me, watching them near the bridge. The letter stated that if I continued this behavior, they would seek a restraining order prohibiting me from common areas. I crumpled the letter in my fist. $4,000 total in fines, but that wasn't what burned. They were systematically silencing me, using the HOA rules as a weapon to prevent me from protecting my neighbors. I thought about Sarah, about what she would say. She had always been the calm one, the voice of reason who could talk me down when my engineering certainty clashed with political realities. But she wasn't here, and I was running out of options. That evening I created a flyer on my computer. It was simple and direct. Warning: Willow Creek Bridge has structural damage. Use at your own risk. I printed 200 copies and spent the next morning distributing them to mailboxes throughout the neighborhood. By that afternoon my phone was ringing off the hook. The first call was from Brenda, her voice tight with fury. "Mr. Garrison, what you've done is unacceptable. You're causing panic in the community over nothing. It's not nothing. It's a legitimate safety hazard. You've violated multiple HOA covenants by distributing unauthorized materials. You've slandered the HOA by making false claims. I'm telling you right now, cease this behavior immediately or we will take legal action. Brenda, just get the damn bridge inspected. That's all I'm asking. Bring in a professional, prove me wrong, and I'll apologize to the entire community. We don't answer to you, Mr. Garrison. You're not the expert you think you are." She hung up. Over the next 2 hours, I received calls from 3 board members, each threatening various forms of retaliation. I also received calls from concerned neighbors, some thanking me for the warning, others angry that I was starting trouble. One woman, a young mother named Jennifer, told me she had been taking her twins across that bridge to the playground every day. "Is it really dangerous?" she asked, her voice shaking. "Yes," I told her honestly. "I can't tell you when it might fail, but the damage is real and it's getting worse. Find another route to the playground until this is resolved." "Oh my God, thank you for telling us." Not everyone was grateful. A man named Carl Matthews showed up at my door around dinner time, red-faced and aggressive. "You've got my wife terrified to leave the house. She thinks everything in the neighborhood is about to collapse. What gives you the right to scare people like this?" "I have the right to warn people about a dangerous situation. Would you rather I stayed quiet and let someone get hurt? I think you're a bored old man who needs attention. The HOA said the bridge is fine. The HOA hasn't even had it inspected. They're lying to you." He jabbed a finger toward my face. "You're the liar. Stay away from my family." After he left, I poured myself a whiskey, my hands still shaking with adrenaline. This was spiraling out of control, but I couldn't stop. The bridge was a ticking time bomb. The next day, I received a certified letter. The HOA was fining me $10,000 for distributing false and inflammatory information designed to cause panic and harm the community. Additionally, they were placing a lien on my property for the accumulated fines totaling $14,000, which would be collected when I sold the house or through legal action if I refused to pay $14,000. My pension was comfortable but not unlimited. This could destroy me financially. I sat in my kitchen, the letter spread out on the table, and felt the weight of it crushing down. They were going to bankrupt me into silence. But that same afternoon, something changed. I was sitting in my study when I heard sirens outside. I went to the window and saw fire trucks and emergency vehicles streaming toward the community center area. My heart seized. The bridge. I ran outside and joined the stream of residents heading toward Willow Creek. But as I got closer, I realized the emergency vehicles weren't at the bridge. They were at the playground just beyond it. A crowd had gathered, and I pushed through until I could see what had happened. A child, maybe 7 years old, was being loaded into an ambulance. His mother was crying, trying to climb in with him. I grabbed the arm of a man I recognized from the neighborhood. "What happened?" The kid fell off the monkey bars, hit his head pretty bad. Relief and guilt flooded through me simultaneously. Not the bridge, thank God, but still a child hurt. I watched the ambulance pull away, then turned and looked at Willow Creek Bridge. A family was crossing it right then, 2 adults and a toddler in a stroller. They had no idea they were walking over a failing structure. I went home and called Tom Henderson again. "They're fining me into silence, $14,000. What can I do?" "Fight the fines, but it'll be expensive and you might lose. The courts generally defer to HOA authority unless there's clear evidence of discrimination or violation of law." "So I'm just supposed to give up?" Tom was quiet for a moment. "There is one other option. Go to the media. If you can get a news station interested, the public pressure might force the HOA to act. They care a lot about their reputation and property values." The media. I hadn't considered that, probably because I had spent my career avoiding publicity. Engineers worked behind the scenes, our names buried in project documents, not splashed across headlines. But Tom was right. Public pressure might be the only thing that would work. I started with the local Charlotte news stations, calling their tip lines and explaining the situation. Most were polite but uninterested. HOA disputes weren't exactly compelling television, but on my 5th try I reached a producer at WCNC who actually listened to my story. "A bridge that might collapse? And they're fining you for reporting it?" Her name was Michelle Torres, and I could hear the interest in her voice. "Send me everything you've got. Photos, engineering reports, copies of the fines. Let me see if we can make this work." I emailed her my entire file that evening. 2 days later, Michelle called back. "We want to do this story. We'll send a crew out tomorrow if you're available. I also want to reach out to the HOA for their comment." The news crew arrived at 10 in the morning. Michelle was there along with a cameraman and a reporter named Derek Phillips. We walked to the bridge and I pointed out the damage while Derek asked questions and the camera rolled. I explained the crack patterns, the rust staining, the rate of deterioration. Derek seemed genuinely interested, asking intelligent follow-up questions. So in your professional opinion, this bridge could fail? Not could, will. The question is when, not if. And if it's under load when it fails, people will be seriously injured or killed. And the HOA has refused to inspect it? Worse, they've fined me $14,000 for trying to warn people about it. Derek's eyebrows shot up. $14,000? Can they do that? Apparently. They claim I'm harassing residents and distributing false information. But everything I've said is documented and factual. We filmed for about an hour. Then Derek and Michelle went to the HOA office to request a comment. I wasn't invited for that part, which was probably for the best. The story aired 2 days later on the evening news. I watched it at home, my palms sweating. Derek's report was fair and thorough. They showed my credentials, displayed my photographs of the damage, and included my explanation of the danger. Then they cut to Brenda Patterson standing outside the HOA office, looking professional and concerned. We take all safety concerns seriously, Brenda said smoothly. However, Mr. Garrison is not a licensed inspector in this state, and his claims have not been verified by any qualified professional. We have consulted with our maintenance contractors, who have assured us the bridge is safe. Mr. Garrison has unfortunately been conducting a campaign of harassment and fear-mongering that has caused unnecessary anxiety in our community. The fines were imposed only after repeated violations of our covenants and warnings to cease his disruptive behavior. The story ended with Derek saying, "The HOA says they've had the bridge evaluated and it's safe. Mr. Garrison says it's dangerous and they're covering it up. Who's right?" That's the question residents of Meadowbrook Estates are asking tonight. My phone started ringing immediately. Some calls were supportive, neighbors thanking me for speaking out. Others were angry, accusing me of embarrassing the community and hurting property values. One man threatened to sue me for defamation. But the important call came the next morning from Mecklenburg County. "Mr. Garrison, this is Dale Thornton from the County Building Inspection Division. We saw the news story about the Willow Creek Bridge. We're sending an inspector out this afternoon to evaluate it." "Thank God." "Thank you. Just doing our job, sir. We should have gotten to your complaint sooner, but we're understaffed." The media attention moved it up the priority list. The inspector arrived at 3 o'clock, a stern-faced woman named Patricia Cole, who carried a clipboard and wore a hard hat. I met her at the bridge along with Michelle Torres and her camera crew, who had gotten wind of the inspection. Brenda Patterson was also there, flanked by 2 board members, all of them looking like they wanted to murder me. Patricia spent 90 minutes examining the bridge. She took measurements, photographs, and samples of the concrete. She crawled beneath the structure with a flashlight, inspecting the support beams. She brought out what looked like an ultrasound device and ran it over the concrete in several places. Throughout it all, she maintained a poker face that gave nothing away. Finally, she climbed back up to the bridge deck and started writing on her clipboard. We all waited in tense silence. When she finished, she looked up at the small crowd that had gathered. "Based on my preliminary inspection, this bridge shows significant structural damage consistent with corroded reinforcement and concrete degradation. I'm issuing an immediate closure order until a full structural analysis can be conducted by a licensed engineer. The bridge will be barricaded as of right now." Brenda's face went white. "You can't do that. This is private property. This is a structure that poses a public safety hazard." "Madam, I absolutely can do that, and I am. No one crosses this bridge until we determine whether it can be repaired or needs to be replaced." Patricia pulled out caution tape and barrier posts from her truck and began cordoning off both ends of the bridge. The camera crew captured all of it. Michelle interviewed Patricia, who confirmed on camera that the damage was serious and that the bridge should have been closed weeks ago. After Patricia left, Brenda rounded on me. "Are you satisfied? You've caused this entire circus, cost us thousands in inspection fees, and now we have to close a major community amenity. I hope you're proud of yourself." "I am proud," I said quietly, "because now no one's going to get hurt. That's all I wanted from the beginning." "This isn't over, Mr. Garrison. You still owe $14,000 in fines, and we will collect every penny. We'll see about that." The story aired again that evening, this time with footage of the bridge being closed and Patricia Cole's statement about the serious safety hazard. Derek's report ended with a question: should the HOA have listened to Mr. Garrison's warnings weeks ago? The bridge is now closed indefinitely, and residents are asking who's responsible for the delay. The next few days were chaotic. The story got picked up by other local stations and even made the Charlotte Observer. Reporters called the HOA for comments, which Brenda stopped providing after her initial statement. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded with arguments between my supporters and detractors. Someone started a petition demanding the board's resignation. Someone else started a counter-petition supporting Brenda and condemning me for attacking our community. Through it all, the bridge remained closed, orange barriers stark against the green landscape. Residents had to take a longer route to reach the playground, adding about 5 minutes to the walk. Some people treated it like a minor inconvenience. Others acted like I had personally burned down their houses. 10 days after the closure, Patricia Cole issued her final report. I got a copy from Tom Henderson, who had requested it through public records. The findings were damning. The bridge had been improperly constructed with inadequate concrete coverage over the rebar, leading to accelerated corrosion. The structural capacity had been reduced by an estimated 40%. Patricia estimated that catastrophic failure would likely have occurred within 3 to 6 months, possibly sooner under heavy loading. In my professional opinion, the report concluded, Mr. Garrison's assessment was accurate and his warnings were prudent. This bridge posed a serious and imminent danger to public safety. The delay in addressing this hazard was unreasonable and potentially negligent. Tom called me as soon as he read the report. This is good for you, Gregory, really good. It validates everything you've been saying and undermines the HOA's position that you were fear-mongering. Can I use it to fight the fines? Absolutely. We can file a lawsuit claiming the fines were retaliatory and based on false premises. The HOA claimed you were spreading false information, but the county inspector just confirmed your information was accurate. They penalized you for being right. What are my chances? Better than 50-50, I'd say. Probably better. Judges don't like HOAs abusing their power, and this is a pretty clear case of abuse. They punished you for reporting a legitimate safety hazard. We filed the lawsuit 3 weeks later. I was suing the HOA to void the fines and seeking reimbursement for my legal fees. Tom advised me we could also seek damages for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress, but I wasn't interested in getting rich. I just wanted the fines removed and maybe an apology. Though I knew the latter was unlikely, the HOA fought back hard. They hired a law firm from Charlotte, expensive attorneys who filed motion after motion trying to get the case dismissed. Their argument was simple. The fines were imposed for violating covenants, not for reporting safety hazards. I had trespassed, disrupted meetings, and distributed unauthorized materials. The fact that I happened to be right about the bridge was irrelevant to whether I had violated the rules. It was technically a sound argument, and I worried it might work. But Tom was confident. The context matters. They were clearly targeting you to silence your safety warnings. That's retaliation, and courts don't look kindly on it. While the lawsuit ground through the legal system, the HOA held a special meeting to discuss the bridge. The full structural engineering report had come back, recommending complete replacement at an estimated cost of $180,000. The HOA's insurance company was refusing to cover it, claiming the damage resulted from improper construction and maintenance, not a covered peril. That meant the cost would have to be covered through a special assessment on all homeowners. The meeting was packed, probably 100 residents crammed into the community center. Brenda presented the findings and the cost estimate with visible discomfort. When she mentioned the special assessment of approximately $300 per household, the room erupted. "Why should we pay for the board's negligence?" someone shouted. "If you had listened to Mr. Garrison, maybe we could have repaired it instead of replacing it," another voice called out. Brenda tried to maintain control. The damage was pre-existing and not detectable through normal inspections. We acted as soon as we were made aware of the severity. I stood up. The room went quiet. "That's not true, Brenda. I gave you a detailed report 37 days before the county closed the bridge. I warned you it was serious. You called it fear-mongering and fined me for trying to protect our neighbors. You were not a licensed inspector," Brenda shot back. "We had no way to verify your claims. You could have hired an inspector. It would have cost maybe $2,000. Instead, you ignored the problem, and now it's costing us $180,000. You chose your ego over safety and over fiscal responsibility." The room erupted in arguments again. Some people defended Brenda, saying she couldn't have known. Others called for her resignation. The meeting eventually dissolved into chaos, and Brenda adjourned it early. Over the following weeks, a recall petition began circulating for Brenda and 2 other board members who had supported her position. It needed signatures from 30% of homeowners to trigger a recall election. I signed it but didn't actively campaign. I had done enough fighting. The lawsuit went to trial 5 months after I filed it. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, just a simple hearing room with the judge, lawyers, a court reporter, and a few spectators. Tom presented our case methodically, walking through the timeline of events. He introduced Patricia Cole's reports as evidence, along with my engineering credentials and documentation. He showed that every fine had been imposed after I raised safety concerns about the bridge. The HOA's attorney argued that the fines were properly imposed under the covenants for specific rule violations. Mr. Garrison trespassed on restricted property, disrupted an official meeting, distributed unauthorized materials, and engaged in surveillance that made residents uncomfortable. These are all clear violations of the covenants he agreed to when he purchased his home. The HOA was well within its rights to impose fines. Judge Amanda Russell listened carefully to both sides, occasionally asking questions. She was in her 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. When both attorneys had finished, she took a short recess to review the evidence. When she returned, her expression was stern. "I've reviewed the timeline and the evidence presented. While it's true that Mr. Garrison technically violated certain HOA covenants, it's also clear that these violations occurred in the context of his attempt to report a serious safety hazard. The county inspector's report confirms that Mr. Garrison's concerns were not only legitimate but urgent. A reasonable HOA board would have investigated these concerns promptly, rather than penalizing the person who reported them." I felt a surge of hope. Judge Russell continued. "The pattern of escalating fines culminating in a $14,000 penalty appears to be retaliatory in nature. The HOA's stated reasons for the fines are pretextual. The true motivation was to silence Mr. Garrison's safety warnings, which is an inappropriate and potentially dangerous abuse of HOA authority." Brenda's attorney started to object, but the judge held up her hand. "I'm ruling in favor of the plaintiff. All fines imposed on Mr. Garrison in connection with the Willow Creek Bridge matter are hereby voided. The property lien is dissolved. Additionally, the HOA is ordered to reimburse Mr. Garrison for his legal fees and court costs. The board should be grateful that Mr. Garrison's persistence prevented what could have been a tragedy." Relief washed over me so intensely I felt dizzy. Tom squeezed my shoulder, grinning. Across the courtroom, Brenda sat frozen, her face a mask of fury and humiliation. The judge wasn't finished. "I'm also ordering the HOA to conduct a comprehensive safety inspection of all common area structures within 90 days, and to establish a transparent process for residents to report safety concerns without fear of retaliation. This case should serve as a reminder that HOAs exist to serve their communities, not to silence reasonable safety warnings." When we left the courtroom, Tom was jubilant. "That was better than I hoped for. She didn't just rule in your favor, she smacked them down hard. The order to inspect all structures and establish a reporting process, that's going to cost them real money and force real changes." "Good," I said. "Maybe it'll prevent this from happening to someone else." The recall election happened 2 weeks after the trial. Brenda Patterson and 2 other board members were removed and replaced with new representatives who ran on a platform of transparency and responsiveness. One of the new board members was Jennifer, the young mother I had warned about the bridge. She called me the day after the election. "Mr. Garrison, I wanted to thank you. If you hadn't spoken up, my kids might have been on that bridge when it failed. I can't imagine." "You don't have to imagine," I said gently. "That's why I did what I did. I'm just glad it worked out. It worked out because you wouldn't give up. A lot of people would have caved under that pressure." "Maybe. Or maybe I was just too stubborn to know when to quit. Sarah used to say that stubbornness was both my greatest strength and my biggest flaw." The new bridge was completed 8 months later. The engineering firm hired to design it did excellent work, creating a structure that was both safe and attractive. They consulted with me a few times during the design phase, which I appreciated. It felt good to be treated as a resource rather than a nuisance. At the bridge dedication ceremony, Jennifer gave a speech thanking everyone who had contributed to the project. She made a point of thanking me specifically, which earned applause from some residents and stony silence from others. The community was still divided about what had happened. Some people saw me as a hero who had saved lives. Others saw me as a troublemaker who had embarrassed the neighborhood and cost everyone money. I didn't much care what people thought anymore. I had done the right thing, and that was enough. Standing there at the ceremony, looking at the new bridge gleaming in the North Carolina sunshine, I thought about Sarah. She would have been proud, I think. She always believed in standing up for what was right, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. A few months after the bridge opened, I received an unexpected visit from a man named George Grant. He was around my age, late 60s, with the weathered look of someone who had spent his career outdoors. He introduced himself as a retired civil engineer living 2 neighborhoods over. "I read about your fight with the HOA," he said. "Wanted to shake your hand. I've seen problems in my own community, issues with drainage systems and retaining walls, but I've been afraid to speak up. Seeing what you went through, what you accomplished, it gave me courage. I filed a report with the county last week about a retaining wall that's failing. They're sending an inspector next Tuesday." We talked for over an hour, swapping stories about engineering projects and HOA frustrations. When he left, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of purpose. Retirement didn't have to mean fading away. My knowledge and experience still had value even if I was no longer drawing a paycheck. I started attending HOA meetings regularly, not to cause trouble but to stay informed and offer input when appropriate. The new board was actually receptive to resident feedback, which made a remarkable difference. We had productive discussions about maintenance priorities, budget allocations, and safety protocols. One evening, about a year after the bridge crisis, I was having dinner with Tom Henderson and his wife at their home. Over dessert, Tom raised his glass to Gregory Garrison, the man who wouldn't back down. I clinked my glass against his. I don't know about that. There were plenty of times I wanted to give up. But you didn't. That's what matters. You know, that case made quite a splash in legal circles. I've gotten 3 calls from other attorneys asking about how we approached it. Apparently, there are a lot of similar situations out there. HOAs retaliating against residents who report problems. That's disturbing, it is. But your case set a precedent. Judges in this jurisdiction now have a clear ruling to reference when dealing with HOA retaliation claims. You've helped more people than just your neighbors. I hadn't thought about it that way. The fight had felt so personal, so specific to my situation. But Tom was right. Legal precedents rippled outward, influencing future decisions and protecting future victims. As I drove home that night, I took the long route through Meadowbrook Estates, past the playground and the new Willow Creek Bridge. Streetlights illuminated the structure, showcasing its clean lines and solid construction. A few teenagers were sitting on the bridge deck, talking and laughing, completely unaware of the drama that had surrounded its predecessor. That was how it should be. Infrastructure should be invisible when it works properly, a background element that people trust without thinking about. The old bridge had betrayed that trust through poor construction and neglected maintenance. The new one would serve the community safely for decades, a quiet testament to the importance of speaking up when something was wrong. I thought about my career, all those bridges and buildings I had helped design around the world. Most of them I would never see again. But I knew they were out there, serving their purpose, keeping people safe. That knowledge had always been enough for me. I didn't need plaques or recognition. I needed to know the work was done right. The Willow Creek Bridge was probably the last structure I would ever be involved with, and it would never bear my name. But I had fought for it in a different way than I had fought for all those other projects. I had fought not as an engineer on the team, but as a concerned citizen willing to risk everything to protect my neighbors. Sarah would have been proud. Hell, I was proud. When I got home, I found an envelope in my mailbox from the HOA. For a moment, my stomach clenched, old reflexes kicking in. But when I opened it, I found a letter from Jennifer and the new board. Dear Mr. Garrison, the board of directors would like to formally apologize for the treatment you received from the previous administration. Your actions prevented a potential tragedy, and you deserved gratitude, not fines and harassment. We have established the Sarah Garrison Safety Award, named in honor of your late wife, to be given annually to a resident who demonstrates exceptional commitment to community safety. You are, of course, the first recipient. The award includes a plaque and a $500 donation to a charity of your choice. We will be presenting it at next month's annual community meeting. We hope you will attend. Sincerely, the Meadowbrook Estates Board of Directors. I read the letter 3 times, my eyes blurring with tears I hadn't expected. They had named it after Sarah. My stubborn, principled, wonderful Sarah, who had always believed in doing the right thing no matter the cost. I pulled out my phone and looked at my favorite photograph of her, taken on our 30th anniversary. She was laughing at something I had said, her eyes bright with joy. I could almost hear her voice. Well, Gregory, you certainly don't do anything halfway, do you? No, I supposed I didn't. When I saw a problem, I fixed it. When I saw danger, I warned people. When I faced opposition, I pushed back. That was who I was, for better or worse. The community meeting where they presented the award was well attended. Jennifer made a speech about the importance of safety and vigilance, about how communities thrived when residents cared enough to speak up. When she called me to the front and handed me the plaque, the applause was genuine and warm. Even some of my former critics clapped, perhaps understanding now what I had been fighting for. I kept the speech short. Thank you for this honor, and for naming it after my wife. Sarah believed in standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. She would be humbled and proud. I'm donating the $500 to the local children's hospital, where Sarah volunteered for many years. And I want to say to everyone here, if you see something that concerns you, something that might be unsafe or wrong, speak up. Don't be afraid. A good community listens to its members, considers their concerns, and acts on legitimate problems. That's what we have now, and I'm grateful for it. More applause, and then the meeting moved on to other business. I sat in the back, holding the plaque, feeling the weight of it. Not the physical weight, which was negligible, but the symbolic weight of validation and closure. After the meeting, several people approached me. Some thanked me again. Some apologized for doubting me. One man, Carl Matthews, who had confronted me angrily outside my house during the crisis, shook my hand awkwardly. I was wrong about you, he said. I let Brenda convince me you were just causing trouble. I should have listened. Water under the bridge, I said, and we both laughed at the unintentional pun. Life in Meadowbrook Estates settled into a comfortable routine after that. I played golf twice a week, attended HOA meetings monthly, and volunteered occasionally with the maintenance committee to review safety issues. The new board actually valued my expertise, consulting me on various infrastructure questions. It felt good to contribute without having to fight for every inch of progress. I also started mentoring younger engineers through a program run by North Carolina State University. Once a month, I would drive to Raleigh and meet with graduate students in the civil engineering program, sharing war stories from my career and offering advice on everything from technical challenges to professional ethics. The students seemed to appreciate having access to someone with decades of practical experience. One student, a bright young woman named Rachel, asked me about the bridge incident during one of these sessions. How did you keep going when everyone was against you? I would have given up. I thought about that. I almost did give up several times. But I kept coming back to one question. Could I live with myself if someone got hurt because I stayed silent? The answer was always no. Once you know the right thing to do, you have to do it, regardless of the consequences. Even if it costs you money and relationships. Even then. Look, I'm not saying it was easy or that there weren't times I regretted speaking up, but at the end of the day I could look at myself in the mirror. That's worth more than $14,000 or the approval of people who valued convenience over safety. Rachel nodded slowly. That's what they don't teach in engineering school. The technical stuff is hard, but the ethical choices can be even harder. Exactly. You can design the perfect bridge, but if you compromise on safety to save money or please a client, what's the point? Our job as engineers is to keep people safe. Everything else is secondary. Those conversations with students reminded me why I had chosen engineering in the first place. Back when I was barely older than they were, I had wanted to build things that mattered, structures that would outlast me and serve generations. The Willow Creek Bridge, despite all the drama, embodied that purpose. It would be there long after I was gone, keeping people safe because I had refused to stay silent. 2 years after the bridge crisis, I received an unexpected phone call from Patricia Cole, the county inspector who had closed the original bridge. Mr. Garrison, I hope you remember me. I wanted to let you know that your case has become part of our training program for new inspectors. We use it as an example of why we need to take citizen complaints seriously, even when the complainant isn't an official inspector. I'm honored, I said, meaning it. You should be. Your persistence saved lives and taught us an important lesson about responsive government. I also wanted to tell you that we've implemented a new expedited review process for structural safety complaints. If someone reports a potentially dangerous situation, we now have a commitment to inspect within 72 hours. We're calling it the Garrison Protocol. I had to sit down. They had named a government protocol after me. I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep speaking up when you see problems. We need more people like you, Mr. Garrison. After that call, I sat in my study for a long time looking at the photographs on the wall. Pictures of bridges I had worked on across the world. Pictures of Sarah at various stages of our life together. Pictures of the new Willow Creek Bridge at its dedication ceremony. I had spent my career working behind the scenes, one engineer among thousands, contributing to projects that would rarely carry my name. But this one small bridge in a planned community in North Carolina had become my legacy in a way I never expected. Not because of its design or construction, but because of the fight to protect it and the people who used it. The story had reached beyond Meadowbrook Estates, beyond Charlotte, even beyond North Carolina. Tom told me that attorneys across the country had cited Judge Russell's decision in similar cases. Engineering ethics professors used the case as a teaching example. Local government agencies had updated their complaint procedures. All because I couldn't walk past a cracked support beam without saying something. Sarah would have laughed at that. You've always been terrible at minding your own business, she would have said, with that affectionate exasperation that I missed every single day. But this hadn't been about minding my own business. It had been about recognizing that in a community, everything was everyone's business. Safety wasn't someone else's responsibility. When you saw a problem, you owned it until it was fixed or until you had exhausted every option to fix it. 3 years after the crisis, I attended another HOA meeting where they unveiled a new community policy. Any resident could request a safety inspection of common property by submitting a written concern to the board. The board was required to respond within 2 weeks with either a plan to address the issue or an explanation of why action wasn't necessary. Independent expert opinions would be given serious weight regardless of whether the expert was officially hired by the HOA. It was exactly the kind of policy that should have existed from the beginning. The kind of policy that would have prevented the entire bridge crisis if Brenda Patterson had been willing to listen instead of defend. Jennifer, now serving her second term on the board, smiled at me across the room as they voted unanimously to adopt the policy. Progress, slow and hard won, but progress nonetheless. As I drove home that evening, I took my usual route past the bridge. A young couple was walking across it, pushing a stroller and holding hands. They had no idea about the drama that had surrounded this spot, no idea that the bridge beneath their feet existed because someone had fought for their safety. That was fine. That was perfect, actually. Infrastructure should be invisible, reliable, trusted. People should be able to walk across bridges without wondering if they were safe. That was the whole point. I pulled into my driveway and sat in the car for a moment, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sarah had loved sunsets. We used to sit on the back porch and watch them together, talking about our days, making plans for the future. I still sat on that porch most evenings, but now I sat alone with memories and the satisfaction of a battle won. The fight had cost me time, money, and stress I didn't need at my age. But it had also given me something precious, the certainty that I had done the right thing, that I had stood up when it mattered, that I had protected people who couldn't protect themselves. In the end, that was all any engineer could ask for. We built things that kept people safe. Sometimes we did it with calculations and blueprints. Sometimes we did it with stubbornness and courage. Both were valid tools in the profession. I went inside, made dinner, and settled into my reading chair with a book about the construction of the Golden Gate Bridge. As I read about the challenges those engineers had faced, the compromises they had refused to make, the safety standards they had pioneered, I felt a kinship across the decades. We were all part of the same tradition, the same commitment to excellence and safety. Some of us built monuments that would be remembered for centuries. Others of us fought battles over small neighborhood bridges that only the locals would ever know about. But the principle was the same. Never compromise on safety, never stay silent when you see danger, never let bureaucracy or politics override your professional responsibility to protect human life. I had learned that lesson early in my career and carried it throughout my life. The Willow Creek Bridge crisis had been my final exam, my last opportunity to prove that I still believed in those principles even when they cost me dearly. I had passed that exam. The bridge stood as proof, solid and safe, and serving its purpose exactly as infrastructure should. And somewhere, I like to think, Sarah was proud of her stubborn old engineer who couldn't walk past a problem without trying to fix it. That night, I slept better than I had in years, the plaque from the HOA sitting on my desk where the evening light could catch it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to contribute to my community. But tonight, I could rest in the knowledge that when it mattered most, I had not backed down. The bridge was safe, the community was better, the precedent was set. Sometimes one person really could make a difference. You just had to be willing to pay the price, and I had been willing. I would be willing again if necessary, because that was what engineers did. We saw problems and we fixed them, regardless of who tried to stop us. It was who we were. It was who I was, and I wouldn't have had it any other way.